Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Laura Gurzynski-Weiss, and I'm joined with Pineault. We are here to talk to you about the Task-Based Language Teaching Task Bank, an open access educational resource database that complements some of the other open access initiatives that you've been hearing about today so far. We wanted to thank the organizers of the REN on Open Scholarship Initiatives in Applied Linguistics. We're so happy to be part of both the REN as well as the panel today. The TBLT Task Bank was founded by me at Indiana University in 2020. It's an open access hub for anyone looking to share resources for pedagogical and empirical use when it comes to language learning tasks. And I'll talk about what we mean by that in just a moment on the next slide. The site was founded by the International Association of Task-Based Language Teaching, and it's housed for free at Indiana University's website. You can find us at the website below, and you can also follow it via the QR code. So what do we mean by task, right? A task is a word that you use in everyday language, and that is by design, right? Tasks are what we do with language every single day, all day long. On the task bank, you will find tasks that have a communicative goal or objective, which is pretty self-explanatory. They all also have a clear non-linguistic outcome. So it's not just using language for language's sake, but you're using language to obtain a goal or an objective. So for example, get from the airport to this Congress site. There's also a connection to real world language use, so you're not filling in verb paradigms, for example, but you're using language in a way that would actually be used outside of a language classroom. And then there's a certain type of structure that we have with all the tasks on the site. There is a pre, during, or post task phases. There could be a Willis task cycle or a pedagogical task sequence, and we're happy to talk more about this with you now or at a later time. But the point is, when you're searching for tasks online, you can find anything. But when you're searching for a task in the TBLT Language Learning Task Bank, you know you're going to find an actual task that adheres to TBLT principles. The task bank was motivated, the creation of it was motivated to advance an empirically driven mission. We know that there are real challenges to creating tasks. So when you talk to language teachers or researchers alike, everyone's pretty much on board that tasks, as I just described, are really beneficial for language learning. But when it comes to either editing existing materials to be TBLT tasks or creating your own tasks, it's a lot harder than it sounds. And we know also that there is a need for sustained support when you're implementing a new type of methodology, whether it be for research or teaching. And there's this large divide between research and practice. There's a lot of research on TBLT, but not a lot of practice in actual classrooms. So the TBLT really promotes this widespread exchange of language learning tasks, so you don't have to search or spend all this time creating tasks from scratch. You can go to this one place and start there with a really solid foundation. It also allows for the implementation of task-based curricula resources in language classrooms. So looking for more of a sequence of tasks and inspiration or sharing things that you've also created. So if you've done a 20 task series, for example, in a language program, great, you can use it in your own site. You could also post it on the task bank and know that others are benefiting from all the work that you did and being inspired by it. And it also allows for the adaptation of resources for both language learning populations and context. So if you see a task in Portuguese, for example, but you teach in Spanish, you can adjust it a little bit, maybe notice some of the differences and the nuances between languages or cultural uses. And it's also a great way as a researcher to go and see what teachers are using and vice versa, from teaching to research or research to teaching, to really have that kind of collaborative dialogue. And don't just take my word for it, but 12,285 people have been using the task site since it opened in 2020. We're hoping that after this Congress, there's a lot more diversity too and use in Asia and Africa as well. So this is something that is meeting a need, and we also are going to talk about how different stakeholders are using the site so far and where we're going to take it from here. Caitlin?
So the Task Bank has three primary audience groups: teachers, teacher trainers, and researchers. And the Task Bank is set up in a way that allows each of these three primary audience groups to have direct access to materials, to resources that will help them and their specific needs. So we'll go through each accordingly, starting with teachers. So these teachers are language teachers who work with students of any age, of any proficiency level, in a variety of different contexts, who are looking to integrate tasks into their practice in some capacity. And for these teachers, the task bank can provide a starting point, like Laura mentioned, resources, teaching materials, and more that they're able to search, find, and download for either use as is or to modify based on their contexts. So you can see in the laptop screen here that the task bank facilitates this by offering a number of different filters that teachers can use to search. So for example, they might search by context, and you can see a couple different options here, and or by proficiency level. And we have a couple different ways of looking at proficiency level. Moving on to teacher trainers or teacher educators, these are individuals who are responsible for creating or leading professional development programs or workshops for pre-service or in-service teachers. And for them, the task bank can serve as a repository that has ready-to-use resources that they can then integrate into interactive activities that represent a range of classroom contexts, a range of languages, a range of proficiency levels that they might be working with the teachers enrolled in their program. And last but not least, the researchers. So these are researchers who are interested in classroom-based designs. Perhaps they're seeking to strengthen the pedagogical implications of their work or build teacher-researcher connections and relationships. And for them, they can use the task bank as a starting point of their work. They can select a task from the task bank to integrate into their study, or they can come back to the task bank towards the end of their project and upload a task and the supplementary materials that they used in that classroom context that they were investigating. So not only does the task bank provide direct connections for these stakeholders, but it also supports and facilitates connections between stakeholder groups. And so one of the ways in which the task bank encourages this is through collaborative publications. The example we have spotlighted here is the open access article that's hosted in each issue of the task journal. And this article features a reflective conversation between researchers, teachers, and teacher trainers about a focal task bank task. And what we hope is that this conversation is not only beneficial to those involved in that it highlights the expertise and perspectives that each of the stakeholder groups brings, but it's also beneficial for those reading the article who might be exposed to different perspectives than they get to hear about on a regular basis, and maybe even inspires them to set up these sorts of conversations in their own communities of practice. Another way in which the task bank connects stakeholders is through virtual workshops. These are hosted monthly throughout the academic year, and each workshop is dedicated to exploring a different topic of shared interest among the different stakeholder groups. So within each workshop, they start with a 10 to 15-minute research-based presentation by a guest lecturer, followed by a more open 30 minutes of discussion where audience members are encouraged to ask questions, bring to the table a resource they're interested in collaboratively workshopping, and then ultimately concludes with those involved in the workshop walking away with resources that they've either developed or they are looking forward to now developing and adapting for their context.
Another way that you can connect stakeholders using the TBLT task bank is through the use of course projects. And one example is a collaboration I have between Indiana University and Georgetown with Caitlin and Laura Bryfonsky. And what we're doing is we're actually walking through new and early career teachers that are part of our teaching methodology class or the TBLT class at our universities. We're walking them through reviewing a task on the task bank. So that's something I didn't mention earlier, but every task that's submitted to the task bank goes through a peer review process of at least 2 reviewers that give feedback, sometimes request changes, and then the task is ultimately uploaded to the task bank, meeting those criteria that I mentioned earlier. So we're walking our early career scholars through this review process so they can learn exactly how to strengthen each task or what makes a task a TBLT task or not. And then they use that information as well to submit their own task to the task bank. So as Caitlin mentioned previously, we really want to engage scholars in these communities of practice from an early standpoint on, and we want to make sure that we have teachers and teacher trainers and researchers all involved. So this is something that we're also encouraging the use of open access initiatives in courses from the beginning. The TBLT Task Bank is also inspiring original research, either new insights on established questions or motivating new empirical questions. And one of the examples I have below is a chapter in Xiaofeng Li's Individual Differences in Task-Based Language Teaching book. Laura Wifronsky, Derek Reagan, and I have a chapter that looks at is the Task Bank equally beneficial for teachers of diverse backgrounds and experiences? And so far, what we found in our study, our multi-site study, was yes. But that's a question that we want to keep looking at. Are the open access sites that we're creating useful as they are designed? And Laura, Caitlin and I also have a presentation coming up, hopefully at AAAL, of things that came up from our collaborative conversations and workshops and the review process itself. So we've noticed that with early language learning tasks, maybe the definitions that we have of task may not be entirely appropriate. Maybe that's a better definition for more established and more adult learners. So that those are things that are coming up both again with established questions as well as new empirical questions. So I think the lesson here is that open access sites are not just a place to house materials, but they're a living, breathing community of practice where ideas can be exchanged, inspiration happens, and it really does further the field in multiple venues. As you mentioned before, with this desire to create community, not just working on tasks on your own, but creating this global community. This is a picture from one of the workshops that we had. I believe it was Ingrid Mora's presentation, or maybe it was Andrea's, I can't remember, but the same happiness is always in our monthly workshops. But it's a great place where people ask questions that you would not think of on your own because people are logging on from all over the world to be part of these online monthly free webinars. We also record them and house them on the TBLT website. So if you go to tblt.indiana.edu and look at Task Bank in action, you can see all of our prior workshops. We don't record the questions. You need to be there live for that part of it, but we do record the workshops. So please do check us out there, and we'll have a whole series of workshops for this academic year as well. We want to end with a few challenges and opportunities. When it comes to collaborating with open science initiatives, we really want to stress the importance of supporting each other in things like the Friend Symposium, for example, as well as cross-promotion and collaboration. We have an agreement with IRIS, for example. There's a tab that you click when you submit to IRIS of that you are submitting a task. They are going to be sharing that information with us so that we can go and see, is this a TBLT task, or could we turn this into a TBLT task? How is it not only on the task bank, but then link back to IRIS, for example, and we'll do the same as well. Whenever somebody submits a task that says, yes, it says been published in a peer review venue, but it has not yet been submitted to IRIS, we can alert IRIS and let them know as well to make sure that we're all sharing the materials that could be cross-linked as much as possible. The question here, of course, is how can we keep strengthening the connections across initiatives? How can we do our own research on our websites and who's using this and better serve anyone that's being missed at the moment? We're also striving to have a greater presence in practitioner-centered spaces. So this is a picture of Caitlin and me at the ACTFL convention in November of 2023, where we had a great turnout to talk about the task bank and had really great conversations with language teachers, which is one of our key stakeholders. And the question here is, how can we empower stakeholders, especially teachers, to share this information in their communities? And how can we adjust our sites to better serve everyone that we are trying to serve? We also want to highlight that we are a volunteer-driven community initiative, much like all of the other open access sites. So when you take away that paid component, how do you make sure that really everyone is participating in all aspects? We are expanding our peer review process. We're also working to support non-English language submissions so that things do not need to be translated, but they could be there in the original language in which they're intended. And the question is, of course, how can we make the resource free for all without unequal burden on specific groups, especially early career scholars, scholars of color, and scholars from areas where there's less support for educational research and educational innovation. Finally, we also want to talk about the contribution of the task bank to the TBLT research agenda. As I mentioned before, we have presentations at upcoming conferences. Hopefully we haven't heard from AAAO yet, but we are really excited about the opportunity that the task bank and other open access initiatives have for not only being a repository, but really furthering conversations. And the question is, of course, how can we show the benefit of these types of initiatives to new communities and existing communities as well? So thank you so much for logging on or being here with us. I am at the ILA Congress this week, so please do seek me out if you want to engage in person about the task bank. If not, you're welcome to reach us at any of these venues, on the website, Gmail, Facebook, at the Task Bank. Please let us know if you'd like to be part of our email listserv and be notified of all the things that we have going on. Thanks so much for logging on and hope to see you all soon.